I'm so thrilled to see so many people here today. You know, I have to say, until Dan's opening remarks just now, it hadn't even occurred to me what the date today is, that it's the anniversary of Pearl Harbor, and I think it's so appropriate that we're beginning the forum here today on this anniversary with a session about future challenges and the need for the U.S. military and the U.S. government to transform, to face the future challenges, especially when you look back and think about the fact that how much this nation, this military, this world has changed since Pearl Harbor. So we have a tremendous group up here today to talk about those things. We have Doug Beck, he's the Director of Defense Innovation Unit and Senior Advisor to the Secretary of Defense. Ms. Michèle Flournoy, oops, I have my list here wrong. Ms. Michèle Flournoy, co-founder and managing partner of West Exec Advisors and the former Undersecretary of Defense for Policy, and General Bryan Fenton, commander of U.S. Special Operations Command, who I have a feeling is going to be our interesting and joke maker up here today, so we'll try to keep him in line. I do want to talk about future challenges, but because we're the first panel and we have a 4-star general up here, I do want to ask about one little bit of news that we had this week. Senator Tuberville announcing that he was going to lift the hold on most of the nominations. I'm just curious, you know, over these last several months, while the nominees have been held up, has that had an impact on Special Operations Command? And if so, can you tell us what that's been?
Yeah, I can. Courtney, thank you. First of all, good morning, everybody, and really appreciate being here, and certainly with great friends, Michelle and Doug. So first of all, I'd say we're very grateful that this hold's been lifted, and we can get back to doing the business of the department in a really complex and complicated world, and that's changed significantly even in the last 10 years. And I think, as many have talked about, certainly it's going to be even more challenging in the next decisive decade and even the next 1 to 2 years ahead, which will be really important. So you'd want us back in the business of predictability in the department with leaders in the right places and certainly getting after their tasks and remit the Secretary and the President have given your Department of Defense. So it has impacted that. There's been a lot of folks acting in positions, but not really able to make the decisions that would carry an organization on for 5, 10 years out. I think it's really important, and it's important to everybody in this room and whatever business or academia or whatever you do, you know that having a vision and being able to move an organization is really important. So we're back to that business, and we're grateful. Though there is still some work to do, still some teammates that I think are being held up, and we hope that'll be worked fairly quickly. I would say on the family front that I hope has certainly been heard by everybody in this room. That's had a really tremendous impact in a not so good way, in a bad way. You think about families who think they're going to move, go to a new location, you have schools, you have organizations to be a part of, friends to leave and new friends to make, and family members and spouses that would also have employment and have to get certificates in new states or even across the world, and that's all been held up and it's been very hard for a lot of families, and I think that thankfully we'll now be able to get back to business. So I'll just end with, we're grateful this mostly, there's still work to do, but that the hold's been lifted and we can get back to doing the business of the department, which would be to be forward and certainly defend the nation.
Great.
Thank you for that.
So I want to talk about current challenges. What are the biggest threats? And I'm going to go down the line here. General Fenton, starting with you. Sorry, I keep putting you on the spot already, but
You told me I could tell some jokes.
Yeah,
I haven't told any yet.
You can tell some jokes, believe me. What are some of the biggest threats that you're seeing right now?
Yeah, thank you. I think before I talk about the threats, and I'll talk, if you're okay, both operationally and because we're on a tech and a transformation panel, I'll hit that as well. I would say that to do that, your Special Operations Command team, and for everybody out here, gets an opportunity to see the world globally. We are a global combatant command that has an opportunity to see the world on any given day through the eyes of 6,000 teammates, SOCOM teammates that are deployed in 80 countries across the world. They're a small part of the 70,000 Army, Navy, Air Force, Marine, and Space Force now, Special Operations teammates. And I think they have an opportunity because they work in many domains. They work in the air domain, the land domain, space and cyber domains, and the maritime, to see the world, as I like to think about it, from seabed to space and from fiber to cyber. They really have a good optic on the things that I'll tell you now that we're seeing. We're seeing the PRC compete globally in this world. We're not only bound by Indo-PACOM. They're certainly as we've had the chance very recently to travel to South America and Africa, they're in South America and Africa, wielding their elements of power, diplomatic, economic, and some level of information. Probably more the military piece of that in the Indo-Pacific. We're also seeing Russia, not just bound to Ukraine and the travesties that they're wreaking there, and certainly the unfortunate events against the Ukrainian people, but they're also in other parts of Europe, as I think all here know, and as well in Africa, in North and West. And you, Courtney, we were glad to see you with our teammates in Niger. You've seen what that looks like in some small part in Mali, Niger, and Mauritania, and where Russia appears either through its paramilitary piece or even in their Ministry of Defense. I think we also see Russia in Libya. And so they're not bound geographically just to the European continent, so they're competing there. On top of that, the other challenges of violent extremism. ISIS and Al-Qaeda and even Al-Shabaab, I think each day look to regain their footing. And even though there's been a large amount of work done over the years with not only Special Operations Command, but the whole of our U.S. government and partners and allies to rip those networks apart and keep them at bay from certainly our homeland and partners and allies, they're looking to regain that each and every day. And I think while the caliphate they desire has been contained, and a lot of it in the Middle East, the ideology is still unconstrained and looks to run rampant through the internet. So that's a challenge. And then lastly, I'll just add, just in the interest of time on the op side, the world votes. And all of a sudden, in an unpredictable way, here comes another crisis. And on top of mind certainly is what's gone on with Israel and Hamas. And since 7 October, the world's been extremely busy, not only there, but across the world to address this. And Special Operations Command has as well. But in places like Sudan, even before that, where we had diplomats from the United States and partners and allies that were under duress, and there was a lot of work to do there. And lastly, I'll just talk, since it's a tech panel, we're seeing, I think, as all would certainly attest to, the proliferation of drones. And most may go right to things that fly in the air and small quadcopters, but they're getting bigger, they're getting faster, they fly longer, they're loitering, and they're becoming the many of many's when you add autonomy to it. I think we're also seeing robotics in a way that may be a land-based drone. And in the drone variety, we're seeing them not only in the air, but we're seeing them in the maritime and certainly subsurface and surface space. I think artificial intelligence, I tried to check some of these questions through ChatGPT today already, or Perplexity. They didn't come up with a good answer or any good jokes. But I think that's both an advantage for us as we look to harness that and make decisions faster and certainly grab not only lakes of data, but maybe metaverses of data and put it to use. But it's also a challenge for us as the adversary. We look to use it as well. And I'll just end with the arrival of smart cities. Everything's wired these days. There's cameras, there's pressure device, there's sensors, and it's all being connected somewhere, and I think is either a challenge for us, used against us, or certainly something we should harness. So just a couple of things.
Just a few things,
Just a
yeah.
few.
Everyone's
Not
going to
much.
go hide under their tables after that.
Please don't.
Yeah, and thank you. I appreciate your teammates in Niger very much. I think they were more happy to see me leave than they were happy to see us get there. So,
Not true.
yeah. Michèle, General Fenton just named a number of different threats. What do policymakers see as the biggest threat right now? And what exactly are they starting to do to address some of the things that General Fenton just brought up?
Sure. I think the challenge for policymakers right now is that the volatility of the environment is such that even though the strategy has identified China and deterring China as a pacing threat, the real world is not cooperating. We've got Russia's continued aggression against Ukraine. We've now had this explosive situation between Hamas and Israel in the Middle East, and the risks of potential escalation to a larger regional conflict, and many other, counterterrorism operations, many other things that pull the attention to the here and now because of the stakes involved for the United States and our partners and allies. But at the same time, we have to be able to walk and chew gum at the same time. We have to be able to keep our eyes and some of our bandwidth focused on the most consequential threat in my view, which is preventing a war with a nuclear-armed China, whether it's over Taiwan or something else. And we know that, President Xi is very interested in reintegrating Taiwan into Greater China on his watch. We know he prefers political and economic coercion to achieve that objective, as he did in Hong Kong. But we also know that he's instructed his military to have options ready for him by 2027. And so we need to be able to anticipate a potential test of our ability to deter in that time frame. And that is really driving in the Pentagon, I think, a lot of leadership effort to, first of all, set the theater with our allies. So the work you see happening with AUKUS, the work you see happening in the Quad, our deepening relationship with Japan, Korea, Philippines, and other allies and partners, all very critical. But it's also put a premium on accelerating the adoption of innovative technologies, their integration into the legacy force, and doing that with speed and scale. That is going to be critical to us passing that deterrence test and presenting President Xi, if he ever thinks about using force, with enough dilemmas and enough challenges that he says, not today. And so, I know we'll talk a lot about the technology piece of that when we get to Doug, but I just wanted to put a pin in another key issue that is not getting enough attention, and that is the human capital piece. We have got to transform our workforce. I'm not suggesting that the Pentagon becomes a major technology developer. I am suggesting that we need to enhance digital and AI literacy so that you can have the Pentagon and DoD personnel can be smart evaluators of technology, smart buyers of technology, smart integrators and testers and evaluators of technology, smart users of that technology, and overseers. So we have to increase the tech and AI and digital literacy of the department. Lots of great ideas out there to do that, whether it's making better use of the talent we have by giving tech competent people in the military and in the civil service actual career paths to hone that proficiency and make larger and larger contributions, or bringing in new talent through new pipelines, whether, there are all kinds. We have a problem in this country that college isn't affordable. What if we offered digital ROTC, a digital service academy, digital reserve corps to tap into all that wonderful talent out in our innovation ecosystem? There are some very straightforward, in my view, answers to really help bring the talent we need. This has to be a whole-of-nation effort in this competition. So I'll stop there, but I hope that we'll get to the allies and workforce piece of this. Is not just the technology piece, which is critical, but you have to build you have to work on all the foundations that are really going to allow us to keep our edge.
You can clap. Hey, we'll take all the claps here, believe me. I work in TV. You can clap after every answer here. Doug, Michèle mentioned the adoption of innovative technologies, and I'm sorry, I'm not even using my mic. Michèle, you mentioned the adoption of innovative technologies, and you oversee the department's efforts to speed up that sort of adoption of commercial technology. And I wonder where has innovation been on these threats that we're hearing about here, and where is DIU taking the innovation right now?
Great. Well, so first of all, it's fantastic to be up here and really great to be up here with two great friends and teammates. It's an honor to be together for this. And I actually also think it's very fitting that we are sitting here today on Pearl Harbor Day. Because I think that can help to crystallize the mind of what happens when you aren't prepared the way that you need to be. And frankly, if we end up in the kind of conflict that Michèle was just talking about, if deterrence were to fail, we aren't going to have the time between Pearl Harbor and Midway. And so we have to get this right now. So I think that context is particularly useful. really, if you maybe step back against the problem sets that we face as a nation, whether it's that pacing challenge from China or the others that we are facing, we simply cannot solve for those unless we fully leverage the capability of technology and the incredible, amazing capability that is resident in our tech sector here in the United States and in our allies and partners. We have to take full advantage of that. And we have to do that, first of all, because of the speed that we can bring that capability to bear, which frankly can often be a lot faster than our more traditional pathways of developing more bespoke capabilities for national security, but also because the quality and capability of that technology, much of that innovation is resident in that tech sector. In 11 of the 14 areas that we track as a department, things like artificial intelligence, autonomy, cyber, space now, biotechnology, those areas are not just going faster, but are always going to go faster, driven by the relentless demands of billions of consumers around the world and the enterprises that serve them. And I just came from that world, although I've also worn a uniform for 26 years on a part-time basis, including a lot of time with General Fenton. That capability is always going to go faster in order to meet those demands. And so we have to, at the same time that we go hard and deep to take full advantage of our bespoke capabilities and pathways, we have to also take advantage of that. And that's really, getting after that is why Secretary Ash Carter stood DIU, then X, up originally back in 2015. And he was truly prescient in seeing that and wanting to get after it. And so if you step back and look at that, and I actually had the privilege of kind of being part of that merry cabal that helped make that happen on a part-time basis. Back then, really DIU 1.0, as I like to call it, was really just about building a bridge kind of at all between the department and the tech sector because we didn't have one. And we are now light years obviously past that. And frankly, the extent to which we're light years past is evident right here up on stage because you've got leaders at the pointy end and leaders at the policy end of the spectrum speaking and thinking with incredible depth and understanding of what happens in technology and what's happening in technology and what role it plays. You didn't have a commander of SOCOM saying fiber to cyber in 2015. So we're way past that. 2.0 of DIU was about proving that you could take a real military problem and a commercially derived technology, bring them together, and create real impact through real solutions that can help to solve that problem, and then use authorities that we already had on the books to rapidly prototype those things and get them out to be able to be fielded or scaled within weeks or months, not years and years. And that's now been done tons and tons of times. It's been done at DIU. It's been done through all the other innovation and entities that have built up that across the department. All those teammates that we have, we've now done that lots of times. And that's great, but it's not good enough yet. Because what we have to do is take that capability and apply it for strategic effect. And by strategic effect, I mean we have to apply that capability so that we can deter the major conflicts that Michèle was just talking about, or win if we are forced to fight. And until we have done that, we haven't actually achieved that vision that Secretary Carter was talking about when he stood up DIU X in the first place. And doing that is about focusing first on solving those most critical problems that are necessary for that strategic effect, and then working as a whole department in order to scale that capability in order to deliver those strategic effects and do that fast. Doing that is a very different game. That's why, that's what DIU 3.0 is all about. That's why the Secretary has elevated DIU to be a direct report, and that's also why I messed up my perfectly good life to come and join the team and come do it.
But you got to be part of a merry cabal. I love DIU as the idea of it's a merry cabal of people. So we're talking here about transforming for these future threats. General Fenton, how is Special Operations Command transforming? And Doug mentioned speed. Are you transforming fast enough to meet some of these threats that we're talking about here today?
Yeah, no. Okay.
Michèle, next to you.
So, and I say that through the lens of SOCOM is probably, I would ask Michèle and Doug, is known as a very impatient command. And we're supposed to be that way. Based on the type of missions we get, the teammates that join our organization, they drive us each and every day to go faster, to think deeper, and certainly to get to a solution and to an effect very quickly. So I think each and every day we don't think we're going fast enough. We always want to go faster, and as we put it against the prism of what's coming in the next 10 years, we've got to go even faster. And I think there's a lot of ways to do that. Excuse me. I'm used to being in Tampa. It's a little chilly up here. So I think there's a number of ways to do it. One of them, certainly Michèle and Doug have talked about with partners and allies. And I think for a Special Operations Command, that's in our DNA. It's been probably since the time of the Office of Strategic Services in the OSS, who needed partners and allies in World War II to do jobs in the European theater with the French resistance, and certainly in the Pacific campaign in places like the Philippines, in order to provide some type of advantage to the larger forces, the larger Army, and the larger Navy. And in many ways, we'll excuse me, we'll look to leverage many of them moving out in this very arena. They're in a number of instances ahead on some tech innovation. They're certainly ahead on the human capital piece, and we're looking to get best business practices from them. I think what you'll see SOCOM doing to try to speed the flywheel up, as we would call it, is to absolutely partner with DIU. I mean, I think in many ways, the future of where SOCOM goes in the next 5, 10, 15 years with regard to tech, the human capital, and wielding it as an advantage and giving options to the Secretary and to the President that we may not have now is absolutely hung to Doug and the DIU team, as well as to industry, the bigs and the littles that SOCOM is known to partner with. And frankly, we've even gone out into the venture capital and the private equity world to get a sense of what teammates that are really atypical maybe 5 to 10 years ago for SOCOM are seeing. That might be initially single-use technology in the commercial space, but could absolutely turn into dual use that would be applicable in the defense space. So the answer is no, but I think we're doing a lot to try to get after it.
Michèle, you mentioned President Xi telling his military to be ready by 2027 for an invasion of Taiwan, should it be necessary. But I wonder if you believe the U.S. military is transforming fast enough so the U.S. would be potentially ready for a 2027 invasion of Taiwan. And if not, what more does the U.S. need to focus more on?
So I think that, if I were to give an assessment, I think the leadership of the department writ large understands the challenge and feels a great sense of urgency. I think that steps have been taken, like hiring someone like Doug, elevating DIU, empowering the organization. They're saying all the right things. They're spending a lot of time on it. In my experience, one of the big lessons I took away from my time in the Pentagon is that getting the policy right is not enough. If you actually want to change behavior, you have to realign the incentives of individuals whose behavior you're trying to change. And so it means really retraining parts of our acquisition core to work with speed and commercially driven technologies that go through an agile development process, very, very different than how we traditionally acquire large military platforms. It means incentivizing them, meaning they get rewarded, they get promoted, they have a career path, and so forth. And it also means that while Congress has been incredibly generous with more flexible authorities, there are some additional things we need from Congress. We need Congress to actually fund DIU to scale, to accelerate the scaling of promising technologies that meet urgent operational needs, like the replicator initiative, for example. We need Congress to give the department some additional flexibility to move monies within capability portfolios. These technologies are changing every 18 months, and if you program something in 2 or 3 year cycles, you're going to be buying something that's already obsolete by the time you get it. So we've got to have some further help from Congress as well.
Doug, you mentioned your role as on strategic effects at DIU as well. And I wonder if you think you right now, I mean, Michèle just talked about the need for more funding for DIU. Do you have the tools and the funding to actually be able to transform, to deter future conflicts? And let's just name one, right? Let's talk about China. Do you have what you need to deter against a potential conflict, China, a conflict in Taiwan, invasion of Taiwan?
So I guess I would say not yet, but we're on our way. And I'll maybe make 3 points around where we are, and I think where we've got ahead. The first one, by the way, is speaking of funding. We need there to be a defense appropriations, but we need a budget so we can after that has an enormous effect across the department in a myriad ways, not only about what we're getting up to. So 3 things. The first one is I do think that we are at a tipping point right now in the department and as a nation in getting after this. And if you compare where we are to where we were in those early days back in, say, 2015, today we have a Secretary of Defense who clearly gets this and a Deputy Secretary who clearly gets it. We have leadership across the department who get it. We have interagency partners from the White House to everywhere that get it. We have a commercial tech sector that gets it, where not that long ago, there weren't that many people in the tech sector who really even thought about the fact that you don't just kind of turn on your tap and have the free and open international system come out so that you can build Silicon Valley. Now people get it. And we have a Congress that by and large gets it. So that gives us a tipping point to make change happen. Now, we're doing concrete things right now to start to get after that, things like the Replicator Initiative, or maybe even more important than that initiative, which is a first step, and we'll continue to iterate. That initiative is about both putting real capability in place to meet the challenge that Michèle was talking about, and also to build the muscle in the department as a whole department, which is why all of us are part of this, in order to do that quickly and do it again and again and again. Actions like that that's the department moving to make that happen. Which brings me to kind of my third point, which is about the concept of risk. And you know, I had the privilege of serving with special operators downrange in Iraq and Afghanistan, leaving my civilian life at the time to go and go do that. And when I came home, one of the biggest learnings for me was that I'd spent my entire career up to that point in the private sector, being a private sector executive, thinking about risk the wrong way. Most of what I'd thought about as being risk isn't. It's uncertainty. Risk is a different thing. Risk is risk to mission and risk to force. It's strategic risk for our nation. And what we have to do now, and why that tipping point and those actions are so important, is we've got to be taking risks now that are maybe financial risk, process risk, maybe even reputational risk. And we have to take that kind of risk now so that we aren't transferring risk to real risk for the soldiers, sailors, airmen, guardians, Marines who will have to fight a war if deterrence fails.
So you have to be willing to fail, essentially, to advance.
Take risk of that kind to avoid real risk.
Yeah, Courtney, if I might just even pull a little bit more on transformation to Doug's point. I think when folks think about transformation, maybe specific to SOCOM, they're going to think about tech. And I did talk a lot about that. But I think there's risk if we don't, and then we've unpacked it. First and foremost, we talk about transformation. It's really about our people. Humans more important than hardware is a long time first soft truth and motto for Special Operations Command. And I think the first thing when we think transformation is, when I said no, is the speed, is the education and the acquiring of talent that really understands where we're going in this new world. And a lot of that is just the training, the understanding, and how you wield either AI or robotics or autonomy, and do it responsibly, ethically, and under policy, certainly framework that are now and will come from the department. So for us, the first thing when we think transformation, it's really about our people. And are we educating for the future, taking away uncertainty, and that is one part of the risk we look at. tech. I think I've really hit that one hard. It'd be our second pillar. Third, though, is even our organizations. You know, in SOCOM, we're on a fairly deep sprint to look inside the organization to figure out, are we aligned correctly? Are we organized correctly in order to meet the challenges of the future, and not holding to any dogma that says we should be, you know, a certain number or a certain size, but really, what is the mission we're trying to solve for the nation, for the department, and can we do it a better, faster, stronger way by changing organizations? And then lastly, our tactics and techniques and procedures, how we do what we do. It already looks very different than, you know, when I joined the formation 30 years ago. And I think we've got to continue to do that and just use the concept of risk. And we need to look at risk across all those, especially for SOCOM.
General Fenton mentioned people, and Michèle, earlier you mentioned allies and partners, and I wonder how you see allies and partners playing a role in this transformation, this need for, which seems to be, you know, Doug was talking about this tipping point in innovation, but it does seem to be that there is this point right now where there is an urgent need to transform for what are some very real threats currently and on the horizon, and I wonder how you see allies and partners playing into that.
So they're absolutely critical. The fact that we have allies and partners in great numbers is a huge source of strategic advantage for the United States. And, you know, one piece of good news is, you know, the Chinese under President Xi have really overplayed their hands using coercive measures, intimidation, you know, sort of constant military pressure in places like the East China Sea, the South China Sea, the Strait of Taiwan. And so it's created a bit of a backlash. We have an historic moment in our alliance with Japan in terms of the level and depth and intensity of cooperation. We have the AUKUS agreement, which will give our critical ally Australia not only conventionally armed nuclear-powered submarines, which are tremendously helpful in the region, but also through the Pillar 2 efforts, doing this innovation and innovation adoption, hand in hand alongside each other and along with our friends, the British. The Philippines have welcomed the United States back in. Korea is asking what more we can do. Through the Quad, we're having much more intensive discussion on co-development of technology with India. So, I mean, it's really quite something. The challenge I'll highlight, though, is as you integrate these new technologies, we are going to have to keep investing in means of maintaining interoperability and really ensuring that we bring our allies with us. And that means a lot of this has to be by design for allies from the start, rather than developing something, exquisite and US only that we then have to figure out how to go through all the hoops to actually share it. But I think the more we design for allies and partners alongside us from the start, the better that will be, and leveraging commercial technology will help in that regard.
And we only have about 2 minutes left, but Doug, I want to ask you, because one place where the U.S. is really focused on with allies and partners is the war in Ukraine. And if there's can you share any lessons learned from Ukraine these last 2 years that DIU is implementing now?
Okay, well, we could talk about that all day. And by the way, I think speaking of allies and partners, some of our allies and partners from Ukraine are sitting right out here today. So I want to say thank you for being here. We had some great meetings yesterday. There are an enormous number of lessons here. And I'll maybe mention three big yeses and a not yet. So big yes number one is it is absolutely apparent all the ways in which commercially derived technology of all kinds is delivering incredible impact alongside more traditional things like 155 rounds that you also need, and employed by the incredible heroism of the Ukrainians in order to meet their challenge. But things like whether it's space-based technologies or the ability to crowdsource targeting data from not just soldiers in the field, but civilians, bring that together in a way that you can actually get it to where it needs to go in order to make targeting decisions, to all kinds of secure communications across different kinds of networks that can move seamlessly and operate even where the cellular network either is destroyed or is owned by the adversary, or obviously all the ways in which unmanned systems are playing a role, large, small, and what we're learning about first-person view technology, what we're learning about the electronic warfare environment. All of that is incredible, incredible lessons, and we are learning a ton, and we are employing all of that for both what we are doing to help support the Ukrainians to deter Russia over the long term, but also for what we need to do in order to deter the pacing challenge over in China. So that's one really big lesson. I'd also just throw out two other yeses. One is there are a lot of ways where sometimes it's easier for us to take capability that is resident in a commercial tech capability that isn't already a big program in the department and share that with a partner. Because there's a lot of complexity sometimes about taking our more exquisite things and sharing them, but saying, hey, there's something great over here you might want to talk to these folks. We can do that, and that's something DIU's been helping with a lot, as well as our partners across the innovation community. The third one is the importance of talent. So sometimes it's not the stuff, it's actually our people forward as far as we are allowed to take them to help in all the ways we can to solve the problems on a real-time basis. And I'll end with just the big not yet, because I think it's a not yet, not just for Ukraine, but for all of us in the leveraged commercial tech, which is that we are not there at the scale that we need to be yet for employing this tech. We need to get to that scale. With everything that we're doing, the scale is not yet there in the ways that we need it strategically, because we need that scale in order to not only help to serve the needs of the Ukrainians, but to deter Russia, as I said, and to meet the much bigger, broader challenges that we have as a nation. And our partners in the tech sector also need that scale, because that's the only way that the ROI works. And right now, some of these companies that we tout and say, these are great examples, some of them have actually had to lay people off during the same time that they're doing all these great things. And that's because the scale's not there yet. So we've got to get to scale.
Thank you all so much. We're out of time, but we could talk all day today. But I think Anya and Neve would never invite me back. So thank you all.
Thanks, Courtney.
Courtney, we appreciate a moderator who keeps us on time. Thank you all very much. Thanks. Great. Thank you.
Sorry about that. Yeah, thanks a ton.
Thank you.